Hey guys, so here's part 3 of the day 9 notes. We're going to be talking about how can we use our graphing calculators to write a regression function. Okay, so basically we use our graphing calculator to write or to do a regression when we're given data points. So basically this is like the best fit model, or the really where we know what type of function we're going to write, but it's the best fit equation that works with the numbers are given. Okay, so here we're going to use a graphing calculator to find an exponential model for the data below. Now they will tell you what type of model you're trying to find. So they will either tell you you're trying to find an exponential or a power model. Okay, then after that, we'll predict the number of scooters sold in the 8th year. Okay, so here we have our year, which is X, and our Y, or then the number of scooters sold, Y. Okay, so here's what we need to do for our graphing calculator. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into Stat. So on the graphing calculator, that's going to be basically the third row and the third column. So it's going to be the button right by the arrows. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to plug these numbers that we have in our tables into the tables inside our graphing calculator. So what we need to do is we first need to edit our tables. So you're going to see like L1, L2, L3, L4, blah, blah, blah. So we only need really L1 and L2 because we only have X and Y. So what we're going to do is notice my black, this is what I will call like my cursor. I need to arrow over to the right, so then I'm in L1, and I'm going to go up. Now what you can do here is if you already have like things in your L1 and L2, you can actually clear that list. To do that, you will press the clear button and then enter. Now make sure you don't press delete. If you press delete, you actually delete the entire list, and then that can mess you up later on. So just be careful and make sure that you clear the list. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and plug in my numbers. Now L1 will always be your X values. So here, that's going to represent our years. Okay, so L1 is always going to be your X, and then that means the L2 is always going to be the Y value. So you need to write that down in your notes, make sure. So L1 is always your X values, and then L2 is always your Y values, okay? Or another way of thinking it is L1 is always going to be like if you have horizontal tables, it's always going to be at the top, and L2 is going to be at the bottom. Or if they're vertical, it's going to be L1 is going to be on the left-hand side to represent X, and then L2 is going to be your right-hand side. Okay, so now we're going to plug in these numbers. So it looks like just 1 through 7, so that's nice and easy. So all you have to do is just press 1 and then enter. Okay, that's it, and that's how you're going to plug in those numbers. So 2, enter, 3, enter, and we're going to do that all the way until we have 7. There you go. Okay, now I do need to scoot over to my L2, and I need to once again clear this one and then plug in my numbers. So I'm going to kind of go off of, I have a list with me, so it's going to be 12, 16, 25, 36. So basically I'm going in order here. So I just do 12, enter, then 16, enter, 25, enter, and so on. And then we have 96. Okay. So notice with my L1 and L2, they have the same amount of points. Now, you will always have that. If you don't have the same amount of points, it will give you an error if you're trying to either find the exponential or the power regression model. So make sure that you have the same amount. And sometimes if like you have an extra, so let's say we had like an extra like 88. Well, instead of trying to clear the entire list, because then you have to write that whole thing again, you are able to delete individual points on your L1 and L2. So if I highlight 88 and then press delete, I can actually delete that just one entry. So that's a little bit of a time saver, especially if you just make one mistake, then you can do that. And let's say if you are short one, just remember that you can always rewrite over something. So I can do this as 88 enter and it changes it, okay? So you can always do that just in case, instead of trying to clear the entire list and starting all over, there are little shortcuts. Okay, now we have our list. I have to now go back to stat, and then I have to go to calc. Okay, now what we're trying to find is the exponential model. And so what that's going to be is number 0. It's going to say x-reg. Really, that means exponential regression, okay? So I'm going to press enter. Now here, it's going to say our X list and Y list. So the X list, we say that is our L1, so we always say that. And then our Y list should be always L2. So that's why if you delete a list, if we have as L1 and L2, but you delete one of those, then it can change and mess everything up. So just be careful there. Okay, so now all I have to do is go all the way down and to enter. I just pressed, or sorry, to calculate. I just press entered all the time, and then I press it. So now what it does is it gives us the function y equals a times b to the x, okay? And then it tells us what are a and b values. Now you might see this r squared and r. Do not worry about it. If you don't have it, that's fine. If you do, don't worry about it. That just really means like when we talk about the best fit, like saying how well fitted is the exponential regression model fits our data points. But we're not going to get into that, okay? So just worry about the A and B. So now let's talk about, we're going to probably round to 2 decimal places. So we're going to have 8.46 and then the 1.42, and then that is going to be our equation. Now don't forget, make sure you use parentheses around your B value, and don't multiply your A and B, okay? Okay, so now that we have our equation, our next step is said that predict the number of scooters sold in the 8th year. Okay, so that means we're going to use our model to predict the number of scooters. So if we think about the 8th year, is that our X or Y? That is our X value. So that means we plug the number 8 into X. So now I have Y equals 8.46 times 1.42 to the 8. Now we just plug this into our calculator to get our answer. And now let's kind of think about this here, right? Would it make sense to have 0.85 of a scooter? No. So we're going to go ahead and round up to a whole number and say we're going to have 140 scooters, or approximately 140 scooters. Okay? And don't forget your label there. Okay. Now, let's go ahead. We're going to now talk about the power regression. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to use the graphing calculator now here to find a power model. So as I said before, they will always tell you what type of model to find, either exponential or power. You don't need to try to figure it out. Okay, then we're going to estimate the weight of a bird with a wingspan of 4.5 once we found our power model. So notice here we have X and Y. So when we plug it into our stat, we're going to have L1 is represented as X and L2 is represented as Y. Okay, so now I go ahead, go into my stat again to do this. So once again, I press the stat key that's in the 3rd row and 3rd column right by the arrows. I need to edit my list, so I press enter. Now, once again, in order to get rid of all these numbers, I press clear and enter. It clears that list. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and plug in my L1, the X's, so that's going to be 1.9, and I'm going to press enter. Okay, so now I'm going to do the rest of these. Now I need to do my L2, so I'm going to go up, highlight L2, press clear and enter. Now plug in those values. Okay, so notice I have the same amount in my L1 and L2, so I did this correctly. Now I go back to stat, and then I need to calculate. So now, instead of going to 0 when it talked about exponential reg, we're going to go to A where it says PWR reg. So this means power reg. So 0 is your exponential, A is going to be your power. I press enter. Now I know my X list needs to be L1, my Y list needs to be L2. I just press enter until I highlight calculate, and there we go. So once again, all we care about is the A and B values. Don't worry about the R squared and R, okay? Now we plug it into our power model there. And then I'm gonna go ahead and round probably to 2 decimal places here. Have Y equals, or A is 0.0. Maybe round to, well, this one I'm going to probably round to 3, so we have a little bit better approximation. And then here, 2.87. Okay. Okay, so now that I have my equation, the next thing it did ask us is to estimate the weight of a bird with a wingspan of 4.5. So wingspan, as we can look at the table, that is our X value. So we're going to plug that in 4.5 and for X. And then of course, we will plug this into our calculator. So 0.044 times 4.5 to the 2.87. And then we're going to go ahead and just round. So it's about 3.3. Yeah, we're going to round to that, 3.3. And then notice that for our label for weight, it is pounds, so it's going to be 3.3 pounds. Okay? There we go. Okay, make sure you guys work on the homework assignment. If you have any questions, make sure you contact me. I'll see you guys later.